All right, so we are with Jeremy Schneider here. So you retired at the age of 36, which is extremely young, right? Now,
Yeah, compared to most people when they retire, I think that's true.
now, were you the type of person? I feel like there's two ways or two types of entrepreneurs slash investors: people who make money off businesses, or people who make money after traditional jobs, save that money wisely and invest it wisely to retire at such a young age. Now, what type of person were you? Did you create your own business, or were you a good investor?
I would like to think both, but for sure, most of my money came from starting a company when I was in college, and I sold it at the age of 34 for just over $5 million. After other people got their share and the government got their share, I ended up with
Mm,
about $2 million, which I've been living on since then and investing, and has since grown to about $3.6 million. So
sheesh.
there's some business success in there, and there's some investing success in there.
Now, were you always entrepreneurial, or did you have, say, an event that kind of made you into an entrepreneur or businessman?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I started my company at like 22, so I never had a full-time job. So I guess always entrepreneurial. I mean, how much younger can you really go? I was a kid before that, but I don't think I had like a long history of lemonade stands or anything. Um, I mean, maybe a lot of my experience was informed by, I was in college from 98 to '02, which is like right in the middle of like the dot-com hype. And so like every year you just, I mean, this is the previous dot-com hype, not like the current Tesla hype or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it just seemed like every year there's like these huge funding valuations, and like these, like, just anyone who had like an idea was getting millions of dollars. And so I was like, oh yeah, like that's the way to go. And I started in '02, kind of at the end of the dot-com crash.
Mm-hmm.
So there wasn't really the same hype when I started, but I guess that's why I was kind of eyeing entrepreneurship.
Now, to provide context, what was your business, and did you bootstrap it, or did you use your own money, or did you have investors?
It was 100% bootstrapped. As of the day of the acquisition, we owned 100% of the company. I would say it was me, and actually my mom came on as a part owner. I was the sole founder. My mom came on as a part owner, and then the two of us owned 100% of the business, and never took any sort of funding, never took a loan, never had any capital. And we just basically made a thing and then sold it, and then spent less than we sold it for. The old fashioned way, as I call it, to spend less than you make. And the company is called Rent Links, which is a rental housing advertising service. So if you're a renter and you're looking for an apartment, you could go to Zillow or Craigslist or apartments.com or rentals.com or Apartment Guide or 50 other, 50 of these sites that are out there that kind of all are going in and out of business and getting better and worse over time. But if you're a landlord, you have this problem of how do you post to all of them and
Mm.
keep your ads updated. And so I created a site where you could post once and automatically syndicate to all 50 of those sites. When you change your rent or add a photo or update your description, those changes are automatically propagated out to all those different sites. So yeah, that's what I spent the course of my career doing.
Now, did you have, or did you need a web developer to create those tools for the landlords to create that? Or,
I
oh,
did have a web developer who was
okay.
me,
Oh, wow.
because yeah. So my college was computer science, and I got a master's in computer science. And so when I graduated, I basically just started making making stuff. And yeah, I get the question a lot from non-technology people, like how do I make an app? And they have an idea and they just want to hire someone. And my answer is usually, it's very, very difficult to just have an idea and hire someone to make it and then turn that into successful business. It's like kind of missing the point. And I think that, the better strategy is to basically go very incrementally and like make sure that you have an idea that people want and put something very simple out there and see if people try to buy it. And if they do, make it a little bit better, and do as much of it yourself as you can, even if it takes learning some different tools or some coding or whatever. Because just like hiring someone to build a thing that's in your head is a very, very rarely successful, because first of all, the thing that's in your head is not likely the thing that's going to be successful. And second of all, the person who's building it, if they're any good, they're just going to build ideas that they have. And if they're not any good, then they're just going to charge you a bunch of money to make crap. And so it usually does not work out.
Yeah. Because you're computer scientist, and there's companies that commit to hardware, that's a longer process. And, I was wondering if in your company, did you have a lean startup approach where, you analyze the market, you say, hey, this is a good idea, but is there a way where I can make a product as fast as possible and kind of see if, hey, this is actually going to work, instead of, fully investing your time and money into a fully fledged product that maybe the market will not like?
Well, I really like that lean startup mentality. But when I started my company, first of all, I think I might have, I don't know when that book came out, but I think I started it before that book came out. And second of all, I was an idiot 22-year-old who like was too smart to read books or whatever. Like, I'm saying that in the worst possible way. And so I basically just like learned the hard way. And I think what you just described would have been a much better way to do it. But I basically just like hustled and built something, and then it kind of worked, and I changed it and it kind of worked. And so it's a much longer iterative process before I figured out what was really working. And there wasn't as much like customer feedback in that loop as I wish that there would have been. And so just created a much slower growth trajectory than otherwise would have been.
Yeah. When I hear about startups, for example, Canva or even Squarespace, one might assume like there's really no money involved because there's no physical product. However, the only thing I do know that's very, very expensive can be the servers. But besides that, can you kind of give us an explanation of why creating, say, mobile apps, or even websites from scratch is so expensive?
Well, it depends. And so Canva is actually an interesting one where I think the founder was not a software engineer, which is unusual. And she basically did hire someone to build it. But she was like an ass kicker and also a hustler, and had like a smaller printing business and had a lot of incremental stuff along the way. So it wasn't just like, I'm just going to put Photoshop online and go, it was a much more incremental process. And so, but, software has dramatic range, right? So like, someone's like, oh, can you just build an app? It's like, well, what is an app? Is an app like Amazon that has like, has 10,000 developers and has millions of servers and has, like services and technology and security and like just tons and tons and tons of people and equipment and technology that causes it to be super expensive? Or as an app, like I built a website and put up my own, and it's like $5 a month for a server or something, and there's every shade of gray in between. But it is like a very low overhead business to start. Like when I started my company, I was, basically had the computer in my bedroom and some free software I got from Microsoft when I was an intern there, and just started writing it and putting it out there. But it definitely scales. And if you aren't a programmer and you're just trying to hire someone, then it can get super expensive. Like if I just took the idea for Canva and like went to like local software development shops and said, will you build this idea for me? Like, the price they quote could be anything. It could be like 50,000, 500,000. And either way, whatever you pay, like you're probably not going to get anything of value out of it, really, in my opinion. So, paying people to write software is expensive.
Now, what sort of software tools did you use to make your platform? Was it Ruby on Rails, Java, Python? Like, what did you use at that time to build everything?
So I was just coming off 2 summers as a software developer engineer at Microsoft, an intern, I should say, software developer engineer intern at Microsoft. And so that was my expertise. And so I basically made it all in Microsoft technologies. It was ASP.NET, C#, web technologies, JavaScript, SQL Server, all that stuff, I guess. I've sent my I have another company that we used Ruby on Rails. The company that bought my company is Ruby on Rails. I'm kind of technology agnostic. I don't think there's like, there's like a good one and a bad one. I think it's like the right tool for the right job kind of thing. And I think that, how you execute it is a lot more important than what platform you choose. But yeah, we were a Microsoft shop.
How many lines of code did you write?
I have zero clue. It was, 10 years or so of developing most of the time. I couldn't even tell you. And like fewer is usually better. So, whatever the number is, like you would want that number to be smaller, not bigger, because I'd rather have something like clean and a few lines and messy and hundreds of lines,
Now, so when you built it, when you coded everything and you had the finished product, Was there any pre-marketing sort of strategies that you implemented, or did you just built it and then you're like, hey, now what? Like now it's time to market this baby.
Well, I mean, I think that maybe the story of how I got into it would be informative of like how incremental this was. So yeah, and the idea that I just described to you, like the syndication advertising service, that took me, I think, 3 years to even, or maybe even 4 years to even get there. Like, so there's 4 years of not doing that of the 10 years that I, 12 years or whatever it was that I had this company. And so when I was first starting a company, it wasn't even called RentLinks. It was called Hercules Solutions. And I just did affordable custom software. That was like my tagline. And I was just trying to like sell something to someone so they would give me money so I could use that money to go and buy food because I was hungry. Not like metaphorically hungry, like hungry for growth. I was like hungry for food in my stomach in the most literal senses. And so, so one of the things I did one day in order to get money to eat was I built a website for my former landlord. My current landlord was like a very small, he only owned one property or whatever, but my previous landlord owned like 100 properties or managed 100 properties. And so I built him a website, and his website was terrible. It looked like I think he'd made it in like Microsoft Word. He'd just like typed it all Times New Roman centered on like white background and uploaded it. But he had like 100 properties on there. So it's very hard to like see what's available and sort and all that stuff. And so I basically took all that data and like hand entered it into a database I made, added photo galleries and search and sort and, like details and search results pages, and basically made this entire website for him. And then I emailed it to him, and it took me like 3 days to make that. Like it was not the best website in the world, but it was way better than what he had, in my opinion. And then he did not respond to the email. And so I was pretty bummed about that. I wasn't making money anyway. I like had no income. And so it wasn't that big of a deal to waste 3 days of work, but I would have liked to at least get like a no to my face. So I, little shy 22-year-old Jeremy, like worked up the courage to pick up the phone and call him. And I did. And I said, hey, my name is Jeremy. And I'm a former tenant. I made you a website. Did you get that email? And he said, no, he didn't. And so I was like, oh, can I send it to you again? And would you mind taking a look? And he's like, okay. And so I did. And then at the time, my website was being hosted on a server in my living room. Like my only room was like a 1-bedroom apartment. And so I could see like he connected to it. So it was like no one was connected, of course, because no one even knew about this website. So he connected to it very briefly for like 30 seconds. Then he disconnected. And then that was the end. That was like, that was it. So I was like, well, at least I got him to look at it. But then the phone rang, and he's like, oh yeah, that's great. He's like, we'll take it. I was like, what? He's like, how much is it? And I was like, I literally didn't think he would even, I thought that the pricing was much further down the sales cycle than that call. And so I literally made up a price on the spot, and I think I said $3,000 and $300 a month or something, which I think is a lot of money. Like, I think it's way too high, but he said, could you do $2,000 and $300 per month? And I said, definitely. And so, yeah, that's basically, so when you asked, this whole diatribe was like, when you asked, like, how did I come up with this idea and build this whole thing and then ship it? Like, no, it was just like literally me trying to like spending 3 days trying to get some job. And then from there, I was like, okay, well, if I sold one landlord website that easily, now I could just take his logo off the top, put in someone else's information and sell to every landlord. And I was like, man, that literally was like one phone call. And I made $2,000 and $300 a month. If I sell 10 of those in 10 days, I'm going to, like you start multiplying the numbers, like I'm going to be rich. Of course, like it was never quite that easy again, but like I did sell some more. And I think I had like, probably 10 or so landlord clients. And then I started, I was like, wait a minute, like a lot of these clients, I didn't even know at the time, but like I was becoming their system of record, which means like the only place on the internet that knew what units they had available was like my database. And that was valuable, right? And like other apartment search websites wanted this information, and they wanted their information to go out there. So they said, oh, I have to post to, apartments.com too. Can't you just send my information there? And so basically I like was kind of like over years kind of like figuring this out. I was like, oh, this can be like a centralized thing instead of just one-off websites. So yeah, basically it wasn't just like some I hesitate to say brilliant, but it wasn't some like big idea that a 22-year-old had. It was just like a very incremental thing that formed after I was talking to more and more customers and figuring out what they had going on and what they needed and stuff like that.
So wait, just to reiterate what you said. So your landlord had a really poor website and you made it much better and he bought it on the spot, right? But during that time, were there other sites? I think, was there apartments.com, Zillow, things like that kind of had a similar sort of platform?
Yeah. So, but I wasn't building I wasn't making a whole apartment search site. I was just making a individual company website. So you couldn't search for anybody's apartments. You could just search for, like ABC Management. You could just go to abcmanagement.com, for example, and then just search for their property. So I was making a bunch of these like individual company websites just for the landlords. But then I realized that I was, for each of them, I was like their system of record. Like I was the keeper of their data. And then I put that all together in one central place and then started setting it off to these other sites and kind of became like the piping of the rental data of the internet.
Now, when you said you had a host server in your room at the time, now when I think about host servers, I think of for example, HostGator or things like of that sort, that host your websites. Now, what did you use exactly to host your website? Did you have a physical sort of like machine or system in your room to host your website, or is it?
That's a great question. This is by far the most technical question I've ever done the most technical interview I've ever done since I started Personal Finance Club. So the word server just means computer. And it just means computer that happens to have a specific job of like, giving, requests or data or whatever to a bunch of other computers. It's like, at its like essence, it's no difference from a laptop or anything. And it just is a server because of the fact that that's what its job is. When you think about HostGator or AWS or like a big server company, they don't have a bunch of laptops or desktops sitting around with wires everywhere. They put these like very thin servers into racks, so you can like walk down a row of these and see like a million computers like stacked up, but they're all basically the same inside. Like they all have a processor and they all have memory and they all are running some sort of operating system, and it's like the same thing. And so in my living room, I just had an old beat up desktop computer. It was like a tower. It probably had like, I don't know, 8 gigs of hard drive and, I don't know, not even a gig of memory, probably 500 megabytes of memory. And I was running probably Windows Server 2000 at the time. And, I had like a Comcast internet connection, and I figured out how to, route the IP address from my like, home internet into the wild, so that when someone, and the link that I sent that guy was probably, I forget, like, it would actually be pretty funny if I could find it in my email, but it was probably just like an IP address to like my 1-bedroom apartment, where I was like, hey, click this IP address. Maybe I made a domain or something, I don't know, but like, so he was just like clicking through, and then he clicked, and then he went to my desktop sitting in my living room floor. It like sent back the website, and then it looked to him like a working website.
Now, did you actually start cold calling other landlords to do the same process for them?
Oh, hell yeah, I did.
And now what happened?
I mean, most of them ignored me. Like there's a lot of no's, a lot of, selling a website is really difficult because, it's messy. Like their cousins, uncle, brothers is the guy that does it. They don't know how it works. Like it's really hard to change. Like they can't just, if they want it, they can't just buy it. They have to want to pay for it, which is a big hurdle. And then they have to also like claw out whoever was already working on their website and like replace me. It's just like a really difficult thing to sell someone compared to just like, placing an ad on a website or something like that. We're like, oh, I can just buy this, and all I have to do is choose to buy it. I don't have to like fire someone else to buy it or figure out all this technology problems. So yeah, so I basically just started trying to sell these websites to everyone, and a few I sold, a lot of them I didn't. But I just kept marching along and started growing a customer base.
So once you started growing that customer base, what was your next step? Did you kind of try to create other solutions or iterate your actual domain platform to make it even much better?
Yeah, I mean, for a while, it was just, for a couple of years, probably I was just trying to sell those websites. And then I was trying to grow the business by marketing. And so I ended up working with the local apartment association. It turns out that there are groups of property managers who meet together to discuss local legislation and education and things that landlords talk to each other about. So I started showing up to these meetings and like shaking the hands of these guys. And like, I was a vendor, and I, maybe they thought I was a little bit unique because I was like this kid, although it was a college town. So they're like, whatever, just this like punk college kid that just is trying to like shake us down for more money. Like I wasn't really met with too many warm, open arms, a couple like very friendly people for sure. But yeah, I made a few sales that way. And then it turns out that like the apartment association needed help with their website. And they basically pitched this idea to me, like, they were older, not tech savvy people. And like, there's this young computer science entrepreneur kid, like, oh, you do our website. And so I was like, oh, that's like not what I do. And it's like, and apartment associations have no money, but like their constituents do, all the property managers do. And so I was like, I don't really want to build your website because you have no money. And it's like, and then they basically said we should make an apartment search on our website. I was like, that's really complicated, because now we're not just talking about one company's properties. We're talking about all these different companies' properties, and companies are having to post to two different places at once. And, you have to be able to see whose properties belong to who and different contact information. And it's like a, it's not technically impossible or anything, but it was like a lot of work. And I was like, any amount of money I could quote you for that wouldn't be worth, I would much rather just sell landlord websites because they can actually pay than make this much more complicated thing for much less money. And so like when they pitched that idea to me, I basically thought that was a terrible idea. But then like I started, I started thinking about it, and like a few days went by. I was like, wait a minute, if every single one of their, like they maybe had 100 like members, like these property manager members, and I had maybe sold 4 of them, and so there's 96 that haven't sold. And so it's like, if every one of these 100 members had to use my site to post to their apartment association website, I would have this like incredible like opportunity to sell to them. And so I was originally going to sell this. I kind of remember these numbers. I was like, maybe I could do this for $3,000. Like, I was like, maybe I could make their whole website for $3,000, which is like dirt cheap. But I was like, they could maybe pay it. I was like, no, wait, maybe I could sell to them for $600, because like they would definitely say yes to 600. And then I would like get this like marketing engine going where all the members would be typing their information to my website. And I was like, wait a minute, like, why 600? Like, I would do that for free. And so then I basically, like, after a week, I went back to them. I was like, okay, I changed my mind. That's not a terrible idea. It's a great idea, and I'll do it for free. And they're like, okay. And so then that's what I did. And then then we started selling those. And so over the course of the next couple of years, we were selling apartment association websites to, like, I was in Michigan, so we sold to every association in Michigan. Then we were selling them to like Texas and New Mexico and Kentucky and, like all over the country. And I think we ended up like getting 50 apartment associations or so. And then all of their customers were like plowing in, and we were able to sell more websites to them. So it's all incremental.
Wait, so when you were doing all this, were you doing it as not a solopreneur, freelancer, because you didn't have, was it Hercules Solutions at the time? Were you putting all your money into the business, or what was it exactly?
This is my full-time job, the only full-time job I've ever had. And once I started focusing on the landlord websites, I changed the name to RentLinks. So, the Hercules Solutions thing didn't last very long, but it was RentLinks when I was just doing rental housing websites. And then as I started adding these apartment association websites, and then I started adding the syndication thing that went to, Zillow and apartments.com and things like that. And it was all like, iterations of what we did at RentLinks.
Okay. And you mentioned that it wasn't impossible, but it was a lot of work. Now, did it take you an extended period of time to make it, or did you actually hire, say, another developer to help you out?
I had no money. Like, there was no one. Like, my first year in business, I think the company's top line revenue was $14,000 or $12,000, like a very small amount of money, which was not even, and then I had some expenses, not many, maybe like $1,000 in expenses, but like the remaining like $11,000 was not enough to live on. Like, that's less than $1,000 a month. That was like $800 a month. My rent was like $400 a month, food, whatever. And so basically I was living on a credit card for that year, not wildly. I think I was spending about $2,000 a month. And so over the course of a year, I racked up about $1,000 a month in credit card debt. And then the next year, I think the top line revenue was like $35,000 or something. And still like that was getting pretty close after expenses and stuff. But basically like, you can't hire a software engineer for that. Software engineers cost like $80,000 per year. Like I would have immediately gone broke. So I just did it like, cause that's what I did. So I just like made the thing. And there's no one to hire. It was just me. And so it was this complicated thing, but I just hustled. I sat down and worked. It was like, it was a lot of work. And I feel like, I guess I should ask, are you a software engineer?
No, I'm an electrical engineer.
Okay. I feel like those questions are coming from a place of like, how does someone who's not a software engineer do it? But I guess like, while I went to school and got this like classical education on computer science, like everything I was doing, I was just like learning. Like I had to like, I bought a book on this thing and I read it, or I read the book and I did what it said in the book, And so, I guess like don't write off the fact that because I had a certain degree, it was easy. Like it wasn't. I just had to learn like anything else, and because I couldn't afford to pay someone to do it.
Yeah. Now, how is the learning curve? Because maybe you don't have all the answers to the solutions that you're looking for, and nowadays people have GitHub. They can get other people's code. There's YouTube. All these resources nowadays where people can learn code. And I don't know, maybe back in mid 2000s, those resources weren't there. It was a lot more difficult to learn something. So how is that learning curve when you really did this all by yourself?
Yeah, it's weird. I'm like, I feel like I've been a young person my whole life, but now I'm getting to the point where I was like, oh damn, like this is going to sound really old. But like, yeah, when I started my company, it was pre-YouTube. It was pre-Facebook. Like this was, YouTube was started in 2006 and I started in 2002 or something. And so like, and I'm a little bit embarrassed to say it because my company was obviously far less successful in YouTube, but it is what it is. But and so, yeah, I agree. Like we kind of live in this like overflowing world of information. You can like go to these like coding academies and you can like go through like live tutorials online and stuff like that, which is great. But like, they had books back then. So you literally like buy a book, and I probably still have some of those books on my shelf or whatever. And it's like, so I would just buy a book and I would just read it front to back. And to this day, I still think that's like a pretty fantastic way to learn. It's definitely takes like attention span. I think a lot of people just want to skip to the end and like see it working. And if you like just read a book from to back, they're like, whoa, I really understand like the whole picture of this thing. And I wouldn't read tons of these, but I'd maybe read the first half of the book or something until I kind of got what I needed out of it. So yeah, I would just read books and it was fine.
Yeah, I definitely feel that, even though if you read a book compared to watching all these videos, you'll learn more efficiently because you have to kind of read everything, and it's a slower process. But when you read something, I feel it can really solidify in your mind, and you have to go through all these failures of try to reiterating that process. So for example, I was watching the YouTube video of Steve Wozniak, and he said, yeah, during those times, there's no YouTube, and he had to go to libraries and go to all these books and find the solutions there. And he had all this knowledge of all these books, and it's just a different vibe. I think, all the answers are online. It can be extremely overwhelming. And like you said, people want to get straight to the end, and they can miss some nuances. If they go to the end, they're going to miss some nuances that are going to be really, really important. Whereas if you read through the whole book, or you kind of read a large segment of it, you're kind of forced to, learn more. And as a result, those nuances, you're going to know about it.
Yeah, I agree. Like in my mind, I feel like that kind of knowledge is like a puzzle. And a lot of times people like have a specific question. So they want, like, they're like, what's the piece that goes right there? And so they search and then they find that piece, but then they have like all these scattered pieces, but are missing like a lot of the context, and they're missing like this A through Z, like understanding of what the whole picture looks like. And we like live in this like very like, and I'm as guilty as anyone, but like in this very like, in the moment, short attention span, skip to the end kind of mentality. And I think you're right. When you do that, you kind of get these little puzzle pieces that are fractured, and you kind of like tape something together, but then you're like, whoa, I've missed the context, and I've made some big, more critical errors. Whereas reading a book based on the nature of it, where it's just a front to back, there's no, other than like an index or something, there's no really like searching for just the puzzle piece you need. You're like kind of forced to understand on a more complete picture level.
Have you seen that meme? It was a kind of a coding meme where someone made a mattress, but it was like the title was said hard coded, like a hard coded mattress, where instead of having a rectangular mattress as you would normally have, right, the mattress was the shape of a person just laying in their fetal position. And, that was the only way you can sleep on the mattress. So it was a hard coded. And
Yeah.
I guess where I'm going with this is, yeah, you have a mattress, but it's only in that one position, whereas you want to have, all degrees of freedom, laid out on that mattress. So skipping towards the end, not finding that hard coded spot that gets you the solution. You want to have a solution that's kind of covers
More
all.
generalized. Yeah.
Yeah. So after building all these websites, not making that much revenue for your business, you said you lived off the credit card. Now I feel during those times, as for any entrepreneur, when they're really, I'm not going to say struggling, but not making a lot of money, and that's what they're relying on because that was your only full-time job. Does that really amp up your workflow? Because like, hey, this is the only thing I can do to make money. Or were you like, hey, you know what? I mean, I got an internship at Microsoft. I can always fall back and get a full-time position.
I mean, definitely like the fallback position occurred to me for sure. And, I think health insurance was one of those things that I was concerned about. So I was like, man, if I don't have, so I think I had no health insurance for at least a year or two. And I was like, man, if I don't figure out a way to get health insurance, that could be dangerous, right? I didn't want to get in a car crash and not be able to afford medical care or have my financial future ruined or whatever. I'm actually kind of surprised my parents let me get away with that. Maybe they probably just didn't know, but yeah, but after like a year or two, I ended up just like buying health insurance, like off the shelf or whatever, which was probably good enough. But yeah, having no structure is challenging, right? Because sometimes you can work all day for days and then nobody wants the shit you made and then you still make no money. And you're like, well, that was really soul crushing and did not feel like I was making progress. And so, like you kind of have to work, but also if you do work, there's no guarantee that it's going to be successful. And so, I think it's like a very hard challenge of like working in that unstructured environment with like little, like a very small success feedback loop, and I think it kind of leads to these like dramatic ebbs and flows or highs and lows of like the entrepreneurial like, I don't know, spirit or happiness or I don't know, emotions, where it's like, like when I made that first sale, I was like, oh my God, and like one phone call, I made a sale for $300 a month. You start doing like if I can do one of these a day, that was easy. It took an hour. If I can do one in a day, after 2 months, I'll be a millionaire or whatever, but then like 2 weeks goes by and you don't make any sales. You're like, oh fuck, maybe that was just a one-time thing. And I'm going to be like trying to live on $300 a month the rest of my life. I'm like a just destitute person. So it definitely is like very high and low emotional roller coaster. But yeah, I don't know what to say to that. Cause it's just like, I think it kind of takes a type of person, that like just marches through that. And I think that, I don't think I'm the best at that or anything, but I think that I was very stubborn. And I think that the idea of telling people that I have failed at my business was like so untasteful to me that I just had no choice but to march forward. And so I think that kind of stubbornness in me is what caused me to keep pushing until, you eventually succeed.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Where if you were to make a plot, say like the y-axis is happiness and motivation, and x-axis is time. I don't think there's a linear correlation because you're gonna have those moments where things are not gonna get nowhere. You might have a huge downfall, no sales whatsoever, and then 1 week, 1 year, 1 quarter, you might have crazy output, crazy returns. But then the next, it's gonna be it's going to change a lot. It's not linear. Now,
Yeah,
at what point were you actually seeing some really good returns, getting some good positive feedback and actually thinking, hey, this is going to be, we have something for real here?
Until I pivoted the business to sell the advertising, like I said, it was really hard to sell just the website thing because tearing someone's website out was always a very difficult sales challenge. But then my customers kept basically telling me like, can't we just buy leads? Like we just want more renters to call us. And I was like, that's not what I sell. And like, I wish I could like shake myself back then. I was like, Jeremy, like they're asking to give you money for something. Just start selling that thing, like figure it out. And so I eventually did. And then that's how we had this like syndication service where you post all these different websites and we could sell the leads essentially back to the landlords. And then once I did that, we kind of like turned the corner where we had this like this very slow growth and we had this like much more aggressive growth. And like, you know, it was never, I guess until I sold the company, I was always filled with like insecurity and doubt, I guess. I'd never paid myself more than $36,000 a year. Like once, you know, once I paid off the debt and once we were making enough, I started taking $3,000 a month out. And then for the next like 8 years or whatever, that was my salary, to the day that I sold the company, even living in San Diego and everything. And, you know, I was living very modestly. I was driving a 99 Ford Explorer, like had roommates, like, you know, like running this business. And so there's, you know, I guess there's just never this feeling of like, you know, flag in the hill success, we did it. But you know, when someone came along and wanted to buy the company, that kind of was the moment I was like, okay.
Wait, how did that happen? Like you got a random email, random phone call, and someone offered you money for the company?
Almost, not quite. So at the time we were going to these conferences, these like, so, you know, I mentioned there was like these local apartment associations.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a national apartment association. And so every year, eventually we started going to the National Apartment Association conference. And we were for sure like one of the tiniest vendors at this thing every year. Like there's companies there that are like publicly traded, like multi-million or billion-dollar companies, or whatever. And we were this like little tiny company, like one of the smallest for sure, maybe not the smallest, but one of the smallest. But we were like, the biggest companies were all advertising companies and we were an advertising company. And so I was like, dude, we are like a minnow swimming with sharks. And also around that time, the valuations of these companies started getting crazy. And so when I started in 2003, we were like at the bottom of the dot-com crash. And so it's just like, there was just no action. Like, and I didn't have a very good awareness, but just like no one was talking about, no one was buying companies. But then in like 2004, 2005, when I eventually sold the company, then there's like a lot of money in the space, like acquisitions were happening. And so after like the year before I sold it, I went to this NAA, National Apartment Association conference. And as I left, I was like, dude, we either gotta get bought or we're gonna get like sued out of existence or something. Like, you know, we're like in a dangerous, you know, like we're like in the ocean as a minnow swimming with sharks. And so I was like, okay, let's position ourselves to be acquired, because it's a very, you know, a lot of money flying around. They're advertising, we're advertising, like something that I happen here. And like I said, we're the system of record for a lot of these companies. And so I was like, we need to get as much of this data as possible so that Zillow or apartments.com or realtor.com, or realtor.org, whatever it was. So one of these big players sees what we are collecting and gets scared and buys us before the other one does. And I think that was like a pretty good idea, because that had just happened in the for sale space. Like we were in the rental space, but in the for sale space, there was a company very similar to us that was syndicating for sale listings, and they got acquired for a ton of money. And so I was like, we need to get all the rental data so that we get acquired. And so we had what we had, we were growing at the rate we were growing, whatever, but I wanted to like take bigger steps forward. So I started emailing all these, property management software companies. So not advertising companies, but these are companies that basically do the accounting or do the rent rolls or do the tenant tracking or whatever for the companies. And we were just kind of a very small piece of what they did in the advertising. So I basically was emailing them and saying, hey, we'll do the advertising for you for free. Just send us all your data. We'll syndicate it to all 50 of these sites, which is our specialty. You have a great service to provide to your customers and you get it for free. And then we, you know, get what we get, which is the data that makes us valuable. And I basically started emailing all these companies and just getting like, I literally made a list of the 20 or so that I thought we could sell. And I went from the bottom to the top in terms of like the smallest, worst prospect with the best prospect at the top. The idea being I was going to make some easy sales at the bottom. And then once I got to the top, I'll be like, hey, 18 of your 20 competitors are already doing this. You better get on board. And so, so they basically all said no or ignored me or couldn't even get a foot in the door at any of these companies. It was a total dead end. But finally, like one of the biggest ones, which was Appfolio, which was, I think, my number one prospect, was one of their customers emailed us and said, hey, how come we're not on your website or something like that? And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, we have nothing to do with you. But that says to me that Appfolio is having trouble with this problem, that like this sending out to websites problem, because their customers are trying to problem solve it directly. And so I just skipped to the top of the list and then sent Appfolio an email, kind of like not a super cold email. And I think I might have had one email conversation with them like a couple of years earlier for some other reason or whatever. So it was like kind of a warm email instead of a total cold email. I referenced their customer and I said, hey, this is the deal. We could do this for you. And I was like, it's kind of like a shot in the dark. And then they wrote back within an hour and was like, hey, let's meet and talk about this. And so then, kind of long-winded answer, but kind of, then I had that call. I pitched it to them and said, hey, we'll syndicate all your listings. It's great for your customers. It's great for you. What do you think? And they're like, we hate it. We don't want to do that. We've tried partnerships before. None of that sounds good to us. And I was like, oh, well, like, thanks for taking the call, I guess. But if you hated it so much, like, what are we doing here? And they're like, yeah, we don't do partnerships, but we do sometimes look at companies to invest in or acquire, and this might be interesting to us. And I was like, what? I was like, I'd only once before in 10 years that I heard the word acquire like grace my ears. And like, in the startup world, like, what that means. That could mean like big money. And so, that ended up being the company that acquired us. So strangely, it was as part of positioning ourselves to be acquired by one of these big advertising players. And I think one of them would have bought us if we had kept going down that path. But Appfolio bought us first.
Wait, by we, do you mean you?
Well, yeah, there's 7 of us at that point. So I had employees and everything. And I just think it's more normal to say we, even like I'm starting another business right now, which is currently just me, although I have my first job post already like ready to go. I'm just trying to decide if and when I'm going to post it, but I still refer to the company as we, because it's like, it's an entity, not myself. I don't know.
Yeah. I always think that, if you're a computer scientist, engineer, it's good to have some sort of sense, like business sense or a business hat on, because, you can have a great product and you can be, one of those people who are hobbyists who love like gadgetry and whatnot, and they have a good product or service to kind of offer, but they don't really promote it because it's just for fun, right? But if they had a business hat, they can really make something of it. And I think going back to the example of like Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs, Steve Jobs had a little bit of knowledge in circuitry, whereas Steve Wozniak was a whiz, and all he wanted to do was create circuits. But Steve Jobs had the business mindset, and the two of them made a perfect combination, right? Yeah. So if you're just, engineer, computer scientist, and you have a really cool product that you're working on, service that you're working on, it'll be kind of cool to have that business hat, or kind of create, a personal brand to really put yourself out there, because, you can make a lot of money sharing this knowledge too, or not even just selling the product or service that you created on your own. Yeah.
I agree. Like, my brother is also a computer scientist, but he's more of the Steve Wozniak type, where he loves coding. Like, he's older than me, but he still codes all the time. Like, that's like he codes for fun. But he's like made a few like kind of forays into like, putting products out there, but it's just like, he's like, no, it's all about the code. Like, he doesn't, and I'm like, dude, like, you gotta really like sink your marketing teeth into this thing and like really like ratchet up to like the marketing or the sales or the pricing or whatever. And he's just kind of like all about like the purity of the code, which like I like him. I love him. He's my brother. But yeah, I feel like he's like missing a little bit of ambitious piece. But yeah, he actually worked for my company too when he was one of the 7 when we got acquired. So he was one of our developers. Yeah. Eventually when we started making real money, I was still paying myself $36,000 a year. And then I was paying my developers sometimes 6 figures to help build the company.
So when you sold the company, how was that feeling? Like, did you celebrate?
Yeah, it was a months long process. The first month or so was just like courting. Like, we'd have like a couple of calls a week. We had 2 or 3 calls, and like they drove down, like their CEO and CTO and founder, like all drove down. And then like we drove up, and I say drove down, they were in Santa Barbara, we're in San Diego, so it's like a 6-hour drive. And so like, there's calls, video chats, whatever. And so it kind of like was ramping up, and then, they clearly were interested. And then, one day we drove to Santa Barbara, and we basically like negotiated the price. And this was like in probably like November or something of 2014. And, we like literally just sat across a conference table, and we like hashed out, and like I had an idea like what I think the market would price something like us at the time. And so, and like I think my no number would be 2 million. Like if he offered 1,999,999 or whatever, like 1.999 million, I would say no. I was like, no, like, I'd rather keep it and just see if someone else will pay us millions of dollars later. And I was like, my yes number, where like definitely no negotiation required, would be 10 million. I was like, if he said 10 million, like shake hands there. And so we sat across the table, and he's like, and I didn't know how I was like, I had no idea, right? Like I was like, I didn't have any view into this world whatsoever. I still have very limited view, but I was like, do I say the price? Does he say the price? Like, how the hell do you negotiate $1 million deal like this? And it turns out he had a PowerPoint presentation, and he like was going through some of the other companies he didn't buy and how they had much higher revenue than us, and they were willing to sell for less, and he was saying no to them. And then he went through our revenue, and like we kind of had like 6 different lines of revenue essentially. And he basically said, we don't like 5 of these lines, so we don't really value these at anything or much. And then this one will value at like a little bit. And he's like, for these reasons, like we'll offer you $3 million. And so he's like, that was the price. He's like, 3 million. And I was like, all right, we're like, it's between 2 and 10. We're in the game or whatever. And then I was like, well, that's pretty close to my no number. And then he's like, well, what's your yes number? And I was like, oh, I didn't know, like, I'm supposed to say my number. Those are my secret numbers. I was like, well, my yes number is 10 million. And he's like, well, he's like, that's a big number or something like that. And then, and I was like, maybe I was like, my yes number is 10 million, no negotiation required. But I was like, yeah, but like, I have a happy number too. He's like, what's your happy number? I was like, oh my God, I'm like giving too much away. I was like, and my happy number, I don't think I've said it yet. My happy number was 6 million. I was like, if it's 6 million, like that will be a very good deal for us. Like, I'll be very happy with that. And I said 6 million. And then he like literally had a little, I don't know how much of this is going to be podcast versus video, but he had a little notebook identical to this, and then he wrote a little number 6 on it, just like this. He's like, this is the example. Like, I'm not joking. If you can't see this because you're listening to it, it's a notebook that has the number 6 written in the middle of it and nothing else. And I was like, that means 6 million. And like, I was driving a 99 Ford Explorer, and I was like a broke person. So like, he just writes down 6. And he was like a super nice guy. I still think he's like one of the nicest people I ever met, super honest and transparent and thoughtful. And he's like, that's not crazy. He's like, that's not an out of whack number. And maybe some of this is a little bit like non-disclosure type stuff, but basically he's like, for reasons I can't go into a lot, we can't offer that much for other reasons or whatever. And then my mom, who was there's only 3 of us in the meeting, she's the other person in the meeting. She's like, well, is there another number you'd be happy with, Jeremy? And I was like, it's like, what? I was like, wait, I have to negotiate against myself now. And so then I was like, I forget, I think that's how it went. I was like, how about 5 million? And he's like, we can probably do that, but he's like, it might need to be 4.85. And I was like rolled my eyes. I was like, what's the difference? But like, it was literally like $150,000 less, which is more money than I've ever seen in my entire life, which is like that 0.15. So yeah, we basically shook hands on 4.85 million. And then, throughout the negotiation, like they shifted some of the money from upfront purchase price to like 6-month retention bonus, which was going to have a tax implication for me. And so my lawyer, who I hired, who was super expensive, said, just make them increase the price by $250,000. And so it became like 5.1 million or something. And so that was the purchase price. Yeah.
So
that's how you do it.
That's a crazy story, just negotiating that much money, especially at your very first time doing that. I mean, I bet your heart must have been racing.
Yeah, I mean, like it was exciting. It was exciting racing because, like, it was a good thing, right? But and like I think a lot of people. I was talking to other people who had gone through this at the time. Like, I had a friend who sold a company, and I was talking to this business broker, and they both basically said, "Don't negotiate in person." But I basically like made a judgment call to negotiate in person because I thought that everything that they had been doing up until that point was like extremely transparent and honest and clear and not hardball kind of like just talk to my lawyer stuff. It's just like honest, like, let's really hash this out. And I was like, I think it'll be better for me and for my team if like I go into this honestly and just like have the real conversation. So, you know, I could have said like, you know, I'm not gonna talk about numbers, like talk to my lawyer, but then I feel like he could have been like, who's this like 34-year-old dick who's like not even like going to talk to me, or maybe I was 33 at the time, I don't know. You know, so I went against advice to have that conversation in person.
Now, how much did you pocket? How much did you walk away with? And did you still have to work for the company that acquired you?
So normally in situations like this, where a bigger company acquires a very small company, there's almost always a employment contract that comes along, primarily because the bigger company doesn't want the founder to just like peace out 2 days later and be like, oh, good luck with that mess. Because necessarily when in a 7-person company, a lot of the value of the company like existed in my head, and they didn't want me to disappear and be like, how does this shit even work? No, like, you didn't write it down, you know? And so normally they do, but they didn't with me, which is strange. And I think because they were just the kind of company that wanted to be like all carrot and no stick. And they're like, if this guy doesn't want to be here, we don't want him to be here because he has to be, and is like, you know, bringing down morale because he's just like bad mouthing us, right? So they basically was like, we're just going to be a good company, and if he wants to be here, great, and if he doesn't, then that would be better for us anyway. And so I had no employment contract. I did have like a 6-month retention bonus, which was honestly more of like an accounting thing because they're trying to push money into a different quarter for their business than in the sale. And so like technically if I left within 6 months, although, you know, also in my mind, these are very nice people who are giving me millions of dollars, and I don't want to like give them the middle finger. Like if I had left a month later, it would have been like a huge middle finger to them, right? And so, and then I would have had like very nice, rich people who hated my guts now, and that wouldn't be a very good place to be. I mean, maybe this is how politicians feel, which is why our whole government is bought and sold. But you know, I was also thinking about my own future of my career and stuff like that. So I had no obligation other than that 6-month retention bonus, but I ended up working there for 2 years. And then how much money did I walk away with? The sale price was $5 million. I owned 70%. So I got about 3 million. 70% of 5 is 3 million, about $1 million. And that was spread between the sale day and the retention bonus. And about $1 million of that went to federal and California taxes. And so like end of the day, post-tax in my checking account was about $2 million.
And what was your first purchase?
I didn't spend any of the money. I didn't spend any serious money until like 6 years later, which is this condo you see behind you, which was $700,000. I did buy a new car about, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 months later. Like, you know, looking back on it, it seems like a very short time, but you know, 6 months goes by where you have millions of dollars in your bank account, and like I literally, I didn't spend any of the money. But yeah, I bought a Mazda CX-5. It was like it's like $30,000.
What was that moment when you hit refresh on your, you know, on the bank domain and you saw all those zeros popping up?
Did you see that on my Instagram by chance?
No, I want to hear like what your feelings
were.
Well,
I literally like 2 days ago, I posted a video of me clicking refresh on my bank account, and it went from $60,000 to $2.1 million. Like literally when I refreshed the button, it was crazy. And you know, it was April 1st, 2015, which is the first day of the Q2 of 2015, which is, you know, for whatever reasons businesses have is why they're doing it that day. And I knew that was the day. And like, you know, it was like, and yeah, we had shaken hands on $5 million in like November of 2014. And then there's like December, January, February, March. So it was basically 4 full months where I knew I was going to be a millionaire, but the money hadn't come through yet. And as my mom told me, time kills all deals. And so the longer this gets stretched out, the more likely it is to fall apart for some reason. Like we have an issue, they have an issue, their money falls apart. We have, you know, like whatever, you know, like time kills all deals. And so I literally, for those 4 months, I had trouble sleeping. Like I could not sleep at night. I was just like too excited, nervous, anxious, whatever. And, you know, like the money is part of it, but there's more of like the stamp of approval of like being successful at what I did. Cause these guys who are like super successful and older and have a much bigger business have basically come in and said, hey, like what you've been doing for the last 10 years is officially valid. Like you're not just some clown like in a little back office, like doing this nonsense. Like, you know, we have valued this at like millions of dollars. And like, and if it falls through, then, you know, then I wouldn't have that. In fact, it would even be like a black mark where it's like, oh, you're the kind of company that people bail out of acquiring, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I clicked refresh, it was very exciting. I'm like, and you know, it was very surreal. It's like, okay, it's official. Like, here's a wire transfer, and like those can't be clawed back. I mean, you know, maybe they could sue me or something, but like, you know, it was like a done deal at that point. But then I had no like concept of how much money that was. You know, like the word million is thrown around so much that like, you know, and actually like the CEO called me, you know, like 3 minutes later, and he's like, congrats, you're rich. And I think I literally said, am I like, is that rich? Like, I don't know the scale of like what rich is. Like, clearly it's a very different number than I've ever seen before, but like, I don't know how rich that is. And it turns out like, you know, and it took me years to really sink that in, because like, I think after working there for a couple of years, because I continued to work and had a job and everything, and I realized like my millions of dollars were kicking off more growth than my salary was, you know? Like if you have $2 million and you have 10% growth, that's $200,000 of growth. And my salary was like 150. So I was like, damn, my millions are making money faster than I am. And, you know, and like I started doing this, a few other, I bought some stock and like bought index funds or whatever. And so like my, you know, my two became like $3 million a couple of years later. And I was like, oh, I don't think I need this job anymore. And so I quit. I mean, not, you know, for the best of reasons. Like I wanted to make space for people to you know, take my role over. And I wasn't really, you know, I had kind of become a middle manager. So I wasn't really the best position for me, I think. So I left on the best of terms, and I still love that company and all the people I worked with.
No, it's definitely good that you stuck and you worked there. Wait, but Jeremy, I want to respect your time, but like, how much more time do you have actually? I know we said an hour, but
I got another 20 minutes if you want to use
okay.
it.
No, yeah, because I think there's so much that we haven't touched upon, you know.
Okay.
Okay, so now you get your money, you quit your job, and you know you sold your baby, something that you worked for such a long time. You know, there's stories where entrepreneurs, for example, the guy who made a Minecraft and sold it to Microsoft, he made a lot of money, but he said that the day he sold it was the saddest day of his life, even though he had a ton of money in his bank account, because that was his baby. Did you kind of feel that way, where you know you put all your heart and soul into this business, you were struggling, living off your credit card, and now you're not working for that company anymore, but yet you have all this money?
I didn't feel that. And I
Okay.
know a lot of people do. I think my company wasn't my passion,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to the detriment of the company, probably. Like you know, I didn't have just like this white hot burning passion for rental housing, advertising, syndication. I mean, like, you know, sorry, all those Rentlinks fans out there, but, you know, that just wasn't like part of me or whatever. And I feel like Minecraft, like, it's like this guy's vision and like this game, and it's fun and it's a community, and like, you know, he sold for way more money, by the way. But, you know, I feel like that is like the thing that he loved doing. And when he lost that, it's like, well, now what is he? He's just a guy with money. Whereas like my thing was more about entrepreneurship and like that sale wasn't, I didn't see it as really losing the company. I saw it as like moving on to like the next phase. I'm like, okay, now I'm an entrepreneur with like a successful exit behind me.
Mm-hmm.
But I could see like, you know, my current thing I'm working on, Personal Finance Club, like really is my passion project. This is what I love doing. And I pictured like, you know, it's not really an acquirable thing right now. I'm not sure if it ever will be, but if someone came and offered me $1 million for it or something, like, I think I probably would have to sell because it's not worth nearly $1 million, and it'd be dumb not to. But I'm like, I don't know if I'd want to, because like, it is the thing that I love doing. And like, and if I sold, then I would really, what would I have left? Like that, this is the thing that I chose to make. This is my passion project. And so, yeah, I didn't have that feeling, but I can see why he did.
So, did you have any prior knowledge in, you know, the stock market investing before getting the 2 million? Or once you got those 2 million, did you really like, you know, hit the books and try to make like more money from the money you made from the acquisition?
I did hit the book. So I was I was like an upper middle class white kid from the suburbs or whatever. So like I had like a pretty decent upbringing. And I had a dad and both parents who talked to me about money. And even my dad who opened up a Roth IRA for me at the age of 17. And it was like, I think it was like my second summer working at a summer camp, and I had made $1,200 that summer. And so he like took $1,200 of his own money and put into a Roth IRA and like showed me how it worked and stuff like that. So I definitely had like a very like on the like the spectrum of people's financial backgrounds. Mine was definitely like on the very good end, but it was still like very just casual acquaintance with it. I didn't like understand investing.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I had this $2 million after tax in the bank, I really didn't want to be one of those, garbage men who wins the lottery and then becomes a garbage man 2 years later because he just blows it all. And so I basically hit the books just like I mean, I'm not a voracious reader. Like I wish that I was, and I have like a gigantic amount of respect for reading. But I think that I do read when necessary, and I like take away a lot from the books. And so I started reading books on investing. And so I went to Amazon and wrote like beginner's investing book or something. And I literally bought a book called The Beginner's Guide to Investing, and it was 100 pages, and I read it front to back. And I was like, oh, wait a minute, this is easy. Like investing is not this like super complicated thing. And then I started reading more books on investing, and they all said the same thing. I was like, oh, this is not what pop culture and Hollywood makes it out to be. Like people frantically waving pieces of paper on the floor of the stock market and like pork belly futures and backroom deals and hedge funds, and like it's not this crazy thing. It's like a very simple thing, which is to invest consistently, early and often, to leave your money in, just click some buttons on a website, buy what's called an index fund and leave it. Like that type of investing is actually the optimal type of investing. And so when I learned that, then my money started doing great for me. And I was like, wait, like other people need to hear this message. And so like whenever I'd literally meet with my friends, they'd be like, how do I open a Roth IRA? I was like, let me show you. And we would like jokingly like meet with my friends and like drink and like open up Roth IRAs, and we would call it Personal Finance Club. And as a joke, because it's like a club you meet and like whatever, open IRAs. But then when I started doing it like full time or whatever, I was like, yeah, I like that name, Personal Finance Club. Like it's like kind of like friendly and approachable and
Mm-hmm.
does what it is. I don't know. And so, yeah, if you can see my shirt, it says Personal Finance Club on there.
So you kind of found a new passion, or you found a passion from investing.
Yeah. And well, because I quit my job, I like spent a year like traveling and playing StarCraft 2 and just like doing nothing. And then, you eventually get bored and you want to like, feel progress in your life. And I had some other ideas for businesses, and I got like super excited about a couple of them, but like the excitement always died because I didn't care as much about making money anymore, or really at all that much, I guess.
Yeah.
Like I don't think I could see, starting a company is like a many years commitment. Like you have to look like 10 years down the road if you're going to be serious about starting a company. And if it's like an idea you don't care about and you don't need the money, like, like I said, the first one, I kind of like needed the money. So like that growing something. And I kind of got that out of my system a little bit. But yeah, this next one, like Personal Finance Club, is something I do care about. Like every single day I wake up and I'm excited to like answer questions on personal finance, all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm. So now you do that full time?
Yeah. I mean, like, I don't know what full time means, but like I don't have a job, and
Yeah.
I do this all the time. But it's not like 9 to 5, it's just whenever I feel like it, I guess.
So do you have like, say you have your social media? Do you have YouTube videos, a blog? Where do you want to take your Personal Finance Club?
So, the dream is to basically greatly impact the future of young people, helping bring altruistic, unbiased personal finance and investing knowledge to young, children and adults, so that people can like make their lives better. And I would love to have like a curriculum in middle schools and high schools across the nation eventually, but a crackpot with no accolades can't just like waltz into the Department of Education and tell them that there needs to be a new class. And so I basically was like, all right, well, I'm just gonna try to make as deep of an impact as quickly as possible. The demographic that I'm going for is basically like millennials, more or less, where do I think they spend most of their time based on my understanding of the world is Instagram. And so I'm like, all right, Instagram is it. It's not the ideal platform for talking about personal finance. It's like little visual squares on a, like it's probably better for like, bikini models or whatever. But last January, I started an Instagram account and just started posting. I was like, all right, I'm just going to post every single day. I'm going to post, and I kind of like, the first month was like pretty ugly stuff and it didn't really connect with anyone. And, but I was trying to do a better job of that quick feedback loop and try to get feedback about what people like and stuff, and what people need and what, where the confusion is. And then, started just getting serious about growth. Like, I mean, we can get more into Instagram, but today I have, I don't know, 120 some thousand followers, and it's been growing the last couple of months at like 2 to 3% per week. And so I'm kind of like on this much more aggressive growth trajectory now. I'm definitely, my next goal is to get 1 million followers, which I think is possible in a couple of years, maybe, depends. And then that's where mostly it is. But I also have a website, personalfinanceclub.com, with a great forum where people, it's called the PFC community, PFC Personal Finance Club, the PFC community, where people ask and answer questions from, it's a group of altruistic champions of the individual investor. They're answering questions. I have a YouTube channel, which is basically dead. And I do have a course, which is the one thing that I started selling just on October 1st, like 2 weeks ago, where people can basically learn everything that I know A to Z on how to build wealth by buying and holding index funds.
You said you had a community of some sort? Okay, cool. I was going to say, a lot of people, they also use Facebook groups, and something that's very new that I learned is that I use TikTok a lot, and there's a lot of day traders there, swing traders, and they have these Discord communities. And maybe if you haven't really looked into that, I feel it's like a really good idea to build a community in a way that you can really show them the information a lot more efficiently. I guess it's really a level up to Facebook groups. I think, Discord group chats are, I mean, not that I have one or used it, but from what I hear from other people who are creating these communities, is definitely a big time player.
Yeah, I mean, I like Discord. The thing I don't like about either of those is that I don't own the platform.
Makes sense.
And the one thing that's not great about Instagram, I mean, one of many, I guess, but one thing that's not great about Instagram is that I don't own it, right? So like Instagram at any point can just flip a switch and like destroy like what I've worked for like the last year and a half or whatever. And I don't, I want to, just because, you talk about the business mindset, like I want to own the platform. I want to own the email addresses. I want to own how people see it and, everything. And so like, the community is on my domain. It's community.personalfinanceclub.com. And, I have the email addresses. I have the database. I have the keys to the castle, so to speak. And so, I definitely, and, Discord, doesn't really appeal to me. So I guess like I'd much rather be funneling people into my system so that I own that whole interaction rather than, and then like putting them into a Facebook group or something.
Going back to what you said about, stocks being Hollywood and sexy, and you said it's easy as long as you invest in the long-term scheme of things, right? When I go on TikTok, for the most part, people are day trading, swing trading, and these, I'm not saying that it's bad, but it's more sexy and it's, I guess, a lot more risk adverse compared to, literally just investing in the long term, right? With like a Roth IRA. Now, where do you really, for us youngsters, millennials, even Gen Z, where do you really recommend? So for example, should we be a little bit more risky? Maybe, 30% of our income should go into, stocks, and then the rest goes into our index funds, or what?
Yeah, well, basically, I think all that stuff is nonsense. And I think that those people are trying to sell courses, not actually build wealth. I feel very strongly about that. I feel like it's basically mathematically proven that that is not a way to, because what you're kind of proposing is this like false choice, which is like you want to take on more risk for more growth, or lower risk and lower growth. But that's not true, because you take on more risk and you get less growth. And so it's like it's worse in both directions if you do day trading and futures and options and all that nonsense. And the reason is that the stock market is what's called efficient. So the price of every stock in the stock market is based on the sum total of human knowledge being baked into it. And so when you go and make a choice whether or not you want to buy Tesla, for example, no amount of these clowns with Discord chats, like all disrespect necessary, they don't know. They don't know more than anyone else does, and they pretend like they do, because they want to sell something. And like I sell something too, so like I can't really speak from a totally altruistic perspective there, but like they pretend like they do because they want you to, like, they want to give this like vision of success, and that they're like this trader, and like they point out all their wins and they ignore their losses, and they pretend like they're this great thing. But the thing is, like, they don't know, and so on average they're going to perform at or below the return of the market. By definition, they have to, because the sum of all traders in the market perform at the market. That's how the efficient market works. It's called like alpha is defined as how much you beat the market by. The sum total of all alpha in the market is zero. So all these guys are all competing for something that adds up to zero. And they can claim like, oh, I'm good and they're bad, but that's nonsense, because who's the bad one who's losing all this money? It's like, and even if there is a bad person, like if I'm so bad that I can lose money, someone could just do the opposite of what I do and make money, right? But being bad is just as hard as being good. And so these guys, they all are just random. They're all just random. They're all just random with clever marketing. And so they're just random. They ignore all the failures. They like highlight the wins, and then they sell a course, and selling a course or a membership or their stock tips or whatever. And it's like, if I literally knew how to pick and choose stocks to make money faster than the market, you could make untold millions and billions of dollars. So if I had that skill, would I just quietly use it and make money? Or would I sell a stock pick membership? And the answer is I would just use it to make money. And so the fact that they're selling memberships kind of speaks to the fact that they obviously can't just use it to make money. They're just trying to, sell nonsense. So yeah, basically that's my answer. It's all nonsense. Buying and holding index funds is how you are most likely to optimize your wealth going forward.
And what resources you said you're a huge book person. What books do you read to really acquire all this knowledge and apply it eventually?
So anything by Jack Bogle would be a good place to start. He's the founder of Vanguard. He's the popularizer, the inventor of the index fund. He has a book called The Little Book of Common Sense Investing, and he just makes the case over and over and over and over again about how all that stuff is nonsense. And it just, and all it does is, the financial services industry is a $1.5 trillion industry. And so every year, the stock market is this amazing wealth building engine, but the financial services industry takes all the wealth growth and shaves 1.5 trillion off the top and puts in their pocket. So all these day trading, swing trading, options, futures, whatever, mutual funds, actively managed, like all that stuff, it's just funneling into that 1.5 trillion. It's shaving it off the top. It's like taking all the cream of the crop off, and then you're left with like the remaining growth, which is much, much smaller. And you can eliminate all that by doing like a mainline direct transfer from the growth of the economy into your own wallet with an index fund. And so he makes that case over and over. Another great one is A Random Walk Down Wall Street, which he looks at, he looks at all these different strategies. He's like, okay, this is equal market cap weighting. This is swing trading. This is, head and shoulders. This is like, all the nonsense that all these like traders are talking about. And then he just looks at, and he just eviscerates it. He's like, nope, that's nonsense. You're better off buying an index fund. So there's a couple, and there's I feel like any classic book on investing will basically say the same thing. There's some that I don't love, but yeah, those are good ones.
Yeah, from all the books that I've read, they always recommend that if you don't know too much, if you don't know anything, the first investment that you should make is, index funds, opening a Roth IRA, and then, putting money into that. Because it's going to grow in the long term.
I would just argue that you should do that if you know everything too, because once you know everything, you'll realize it's still better. And like, you hear so many stories about this, but it's like these hedge fund managers who are, in Manhattan or Wall Street or Chicago or whatever, who are like, they're experts who are doing all this advanced stuff and like futures and trading and like options and, backroom deals, like in their own personal account. They just buy index funds because they know that's how they're going to maximize their wealth. But then their job is to basically shave this cream off the top of like wealthy investors who then they pass on subpar returns to.
Yeah, for sure. Now, Jeremy, I already took an extra 20 minutes of your time. Like I said, there's so much more to talk about, but unfortunately we don't have the time right now. But if people want to know more about you, know more about Personal Finance Club, where can they find that?
Hit me up on my website, personalfinanceclub.com, or currently most of the magic is happening on Instagram at Personal Finance Club.
Awesome. So I'll put that in the show notes. So if anyone's interested, they can click on the link and follow you and check you out.
Thank you. That was a great interview. I said like the most tech heavy interview I've done since I sold the company. That was awesome.
Thanks, man. I really do appreciate it, Jeremy.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Have a good one.